So it's week 9. We're going to be adding some social media authentication. Store. So I've copied lesson 8. Just going to open it up. And I'll probably need to put my password back in my configuration file. So I'll try to launch this. You in this class? Are you in this class? Sorry, not you can't be in the class if you're not registered in the class. You'll have to go elsewhere. Okay, I guess I need to fix my password isn't quite right. No, I just didn't take out one of my place fillers, right? So we had our books, and we could log in. Once I'm logged in. So this is kind of where we left off last week. So what we want to be able to do is also log in. We'll start with a Facebook login. So what we can do is I can just pop over to NPM. And if we look here for Passport Facebook, so this is the same developer, Jared Hansen, who developed Passport. There are a number of other Facebook logins, but we may as well use the one created by the same guy who created the main Passport package. I think makes sense. So we'll want to do an npm install, and we'll want to do a ---- save. So I'll just stop my application for a minute. We'll install passport-facebook --save. Now, in order to get this to work, you do have to have a Facebook account. So if you don't, you may, I mean, I understand if you're philosophically opposed to Facebook. If you really don't want a Facebook account, that's fine. You can code along, but you're not going to be able to actually log in or create an application. So we'll install this with npm. It installs pretty quickly. Notice it installs Passport OAuth 2.2 as well as OAuth. So once we install it, it tells us we need to register an application with Facebook. So we need to log into our Facebook account, and then we need to go to the developer portal, and we need to create a web application that's used for authorizing. So we're going to need to do this. So I'm going to go to developers.facebook.com. I'm going to follow this link. I will need to log in here. If you don't have a Facebook account, you're not able to do this step. So I completely get it if you don't want to use Facebook, but you may want to create an account just for the purposes of the class. So once we log in, it tells us we need to create a new application, and Facebook will issue us an app ID and an app secret. And we need to supply those credentials to the NPM package. So once we're logged into the Facebook developer profile, just click on Facebook login right here. And this is pretty simple to set up. We want Facebook login for our apps and websites, so we'll just click the green Get Started button here. And in the middle here, we've got our choice of platforms. Obviously, we want to pick website. Now, I don't think this is all front-end client-side JavaScript, which is not what we want. So do you see this up here that says My Apps? Is there a link beside your avatar? If you hover over that, we want to create a new application. We're not doing this with front-end JavaScript. So click this Add a New App. So this, we want to give it a friendly name. So when a user clicks the Login with Facebook button, it pops up and it'll give the name of our application and say, this application wants to access your Facebook account. Do you allow access? So I'll call mine, you know, COMP2068. And for a category, I'll choose education. And then it should have the email address associated with your Facebook account. So give it some kind of friendly name. And then just click this Create App ID button. Submit the CAPTCHA code. Okay. So these are all the different types of Facebook applications we can create. We want to Get Started button here beside Facebook login. So we need to set up some of the settings here. So we're going to leave OAuth login and web OAuth login enabled. And now it wants a redirect URI. So after someone is authenticated successfully with Facebook, Facebook wants to know what page it's supposed to load. So for now, because we're developing locally, we're going to use this, localhost 3000 Facebook callback. So we'll create a get handler here. Now notice it says URIs. We can actually enable other ones. If we're going to then push this to a live server, we also need the valid URL. So I'll click Save Changes. But now I want to also add, let me just go into Heroku. If I want to publish this to Heroku later, that help? So localhost 3000/Facebook/callback. That'll be the URL that Facebook returns to when someone's logged in properly. But if we only set it to localhost, that won't work once we deploy it to the cloud. So we also want our live URL. Callback. You can put in it, it doesn't really matter. You can specify any URL path you want. Now let's see. I'll just delete this. Actually, I don't want to delete that one. Oh, maybe I do. So I'm also going to put in a link to my Heroku domain so that later on I can deploy this to the cloud, and it will also, Facebook will redirect there as well. So not only do I have localhost 3000, I also have live URL. So you'll need to do this in your project if you're going to do Facebook authentication. Right? For development, it should redirect to localhost, but it should also allow us to go to our live URL. That's optional for now, whether you want the live URL or not. So I've got both the local and the live redirection. So it's telling Facebook they could go to either one of these pages after it authenticates a user. Okay. Obviously, don't use my domain here. Use a live application that you have, either on Heroku or Azure or somewhere else. Yeah. There's also a seat right here that may help. So we've created the application now. We've told Facebook where to go when somebody's logged in. If I click on settings, here is the ID and the secret that we're going to need to put in our node configuration that authorizes our node application to use this Facebook application for authentication. So first thing I'm going to do is grab my app ID and copy it. And I'm going to open up my configuration globals file. I already have it open. Here, I'm now going to add Facebook option, and it's going to have 3 values here. The first one is called client ID. Actually, let me just double check. I want to call it client ID. We better, I'll just double check the passport docs. Yeah. So client ID, and it's not the ID, both letters are capital. That's what the package requires. So client ID. Then we'll have a client secret. And that value comes here. I got to show my client secret and copy that value. Okay, so the ID is here. Got to click the show button on your client secret. And then we also have to set here as well the parameter. So this will match the parameter we're setting up on Facebook. When I move this live later, I'm going to have to toggle this. So rather than calling back localhost, it needs to call back my actual domain name /Facebook/callback. You could, but we're still going to have to toggle it in app.js when we configure the strategy. We've stored those 3 values in our globals. And again, ID, both the I and the D are capital. Same with callback URL. Doesn't exactly follow the camel case conventions we've been using, but that's how these 3 parameters are defined in the Passport Facebook package. Now there's one other thing here we want to set. Well, the API key basically is the app ID. Here, I believe I think it's under roles. So what happens is, the way that it works is you'll be able to log in with your own Facebook account, but no one else will be able to log in with it. So when you use this, if you use this in your project, you'll be able to log in with it, but I won't. It'll say the app ID is not authorized. It's only authorized for you. So there's a couple ways around this. One way is you can add me as a developer or a tester through my Facebook ID, which is, there's my Facebook ID. So you don't need to do this for today's class, but on the project, and I've put my Facebook ID right here on Blackboard in the underneath the assignment. So if you want to add me so that I can log in with Facebook to your account, where did I put it? Sorry. Here's my Facebook ID, herb.tarlick.35. So if you add me or as a developer, as a tester, I'm able to log in with my own Facebook account to your application. So that's one option. The other option is under app review. By default, it says it's in development and unavailable to the public. That means only your Facebook account and anybody you add as a developer or tester can log in. The other option is if you toggle this under app review, if you change this from no to yes and save it, it then makes that Facebook application public. So anybody who comes to your website could then log in with their Facebook account. So if you're going to use Facebook for assignment 2, you either need to add me or you need to make the application public, one or the other. For today, it doesn't really matter if you make it private and you're the only one who has access to it. Okay. But you'll want to do that for the assignment. So if to change it, you just toggle that to yes, and then anybody can authenticate through that.
Did you get that picture from Google? Anybody can use my application. Your profile?
Yeah, you don't know who this is? This guy, this is a TV character from a TV show that I used to watch when I was a kid in the late 70s. Yeah.
I saw the little picture in the box when I added you as the tester, and I was like, what is that hairstyle?
Yeah.
That's
The TV show was set at a radio station, so he was the salesman at the radio station, and he always wore these outfits. So I needed a Facebook account to use in class, so I created this profile. Yeah, he was wearing these suits before Don Cherry. Really. So I have this Facebook account. I have 55 Facebook friends. I have no idea who hardly any of these people are. Most of them, I guess, saw the Facebook profile because they used to watch the TV show. So I don't know who many of them are. Yeah. This was also a character on the TV show. This is another character. So someone created one with the same. But I mean, I don't use it. Yeah, I put in a fake birthday, and every year on that day, I get all these happy birthday messages. Yeah, I get it all the time. Okay, so that should be all we need to do. So you don't need to add me today, and you don't need to make it public in order for this to work with our bookstore. So we just set this stuff up. So that was this part. Creating the application. Now we need to add some stuff in our app.js. Okay, so my suggestion is if you're not on this page on NPM, you want to go here because we're just going to copy and paste some of the code rather than writing all of it. So again, if you weren't there, go to npmjs.com and do a search for passport-Facebook. We want the first one, version 2.11 by Jared Hansen. So the full URL is just package/passport-Facebook. That takes us to the package we're using. Okay. So we've done this step. We've created an application. And we've already configured our credentials in our globals file. Right? We've got our callback URL, our ID, and our secret. So now let's open up our app.js.
Can I quickly see your globals?
So I added blue, a comma after my database connection, and then this Facebook array with all of the values we need to authenticate through Facebook. Later on, if we get to GitHub or Google, we'll have a separate section and we'll have similar values. Pretty much any of these OAuth strategies require an ID, a secret, and a callback URL. It's not very different for all of them. So we've installed So now it wants us, we're just going to grab this block of code, or we're going to need to make a couple changes to it. So let's copy that block of code. This is going to go in our app.js. So inside of app.js, I want this to go here. After we call account.create strategy, but before we call serialize and deserialize user, which manages the user sessions. So in here, we'll paste in this code, but now we need to make some changes. So the first one is these three values should be read from our configuration file. Right, so where it says Facebook app ID, that's just a placeholder. We're going to replace that with config .client ID. Right, it's going to read that value rather than hard coding it in app.js. We want it to live in our config file. Whoops, sorry. That config's not the right word. It's globals is the name of our file. Our secret will be globals.facebook.client secret. Our callback URL, same thing. Let's pull it from the configuration file. We could hard code the values here. Best to leave them in the configuration file instead. There's one other small issue we have with this code. Can anybody see what else we need to change here? Sorry? No, good guess. Those are okay because those will be returned from Facebook. Yeah. So in their code, they've got a user model. So what should we replace user with? What's the name of our model? Yeah, we're using the account model with a capital A instead. So where it says user.finderCreate, we need to change that to account.finderCreate because that's the name of the model we're using. So our code doesn't exactly match what they're doing, what the developer was doing in the documentation. So rather than a local strategy, we're also telling Passport to be able to use Facebook strategy. Now we haven't required it. I'm just going to double check. It doesn't actually tell us to require the library. So we'll have to just check. I'm just going to do a quick check here for a minute. It's at the top of the documentation. So we've installed. Requires a verify callback. Yeah, well, those are those parameters here in the callback function, but there's no require statement to actually link the package like we did with Passport Local. At least nothing in their documentation telling us to do that. I'm just going to check a old repository for a minute just to see whether I did it. I'm going to double check my app.js. Okay, well, we'll try it without. Ah, yes. So that is missing here. We're calling Facebook strategy, but we didn't define it. So we'll let Facebook strategy So before we use it, we want to define it. So that piece was left out from the documentation. So this should be all we really have to do for configuring things. We now want to put a login with Facebook button on our login EJS, and then we need to write 2 get handlers. One for when the user clicks the Facebook button, and one to handle the callback. So the get button sends them to Facebook, and the callback will tell us what to do once they try to log in with Facebook, where to send them if it works. So let's open up our views and login.ejs. Not the lowercase, because that's just a callback parameter, but here, where it says find or create, that method's being called on our Mongoose model. So it has to match whatever we called the model for managing the user accounts. Right? So in his example, he called that model user, but in ours, we called it account. So where it's highlighted in blue, that was where we made the change. So let's put a button on our login.ejs, and then we're going to need to go onto a login image we can download and include. We'll create a link to /Facebook. We'll create an image that's clickable, and it will run a GET request at the URL localhost 3000/Facebook. But we should go and grab an image for this. I may have put one on Blackboard. I'm not sure. If not, we can easily find one. So I've added that link with an image. It won't be a button. It'll be an image that the user can click. Just have a quick look in my lesson 9. Yeah, okay, we do have a login with Facebook. So inside of lesson 9, if we save this image, and I'm going to save this, where should the images go? Thank you. So inside lesson 9, we put it inside of public and images, and just save this as facebook.png. So if we launch our application now, we should have a Facebook link, login with Facebook link showing up. I think I'm actually going to move it down below here. If we click it right now, we'll get a 404 error because it's trying to load /Facebook, and there's no get handler. So maybe I'll actually, probably better ways to do it, I'll just wrap that in a div. I'll offset it too so it appears right under our other login button. I give it a field set tag, maybe it'll space it out a bit better. No. All right. Okay, have you got your Facebook button showing up? Okay, so now let's go back to the documentation and see what it tells us. We'll need to change this a bit, but we're going to put 2 get handlers in our index.js. So let's copy this code, and then we'll need to make a couple changes to it. So grab that, our 2 get handlers. We'll copy those. And now we want to go to our roots and open up index.js. because this is where we're dealing with register and login already, right? These are our public pages. So let's scroll down to the bottom here, and before we export it, we'll paste these in. And I do need to make a couple changes. What should we change here? Yep, so the URL, our path is just /Facebook in the root. We don't have an auth path. So we can take out the /auth. What else should we change on line 72? One other thing. Yeah, instead of app, we're inside of a router, so it should be router.get. Just like all our other handlers. App.get would be if we were running this from app.js. So it simply calls passport.authenticate. That should then take the client ID and client secret and call the correct Facebook application that we've just created. So there's the get. We also need to make 3 changes in this root handler. What 3 changes should we make here? Okay, so what should the redirect be? Yeah, normally with our own login, we take them to books. Well, the failure redirect is okay. We're going to keep them on the login. Again, we need to change app to router. And again, we're going to remove auth from the path because we're not using that path at all. So Facebook will try and authenticate the user, and then it will return to our Facebook callback URL, where then we'll try to authenticate and redirect them one of these 2 places. Let's give it a shot and see how we do. Now, what I'm going to suggest is we're already logged into Facebook in our browser, so either use a different browser or log out of your Facebook account, or just open a private window where you're not logged into Facebook. So I'm logged into Facebook in Firefox, so I'll jump over to Chrome to test this out. My app's still running, which is good, means our syntax is okay. So you may just want to double check your console and make sure your server's running and hasn't crashed. So I'll jump over to Chrome. I'll reload my app, right? We're not logged in here because I get read-only data. Try and log in. And now I'll see what happens when I click login with Facebook. It should bring me to the Facebook login screen. Try and log in. Whoops. So Facebook does the login checking for us, right? We're not on our site anymore. You can see from the URL where we are. So the first time we log in, right, we've all seen this as users, but we've probably never built it before as a developer. So every time you've ever logged into a site with Facebook and you get this, right, that developer created a Facebook application, generated an ID and secret, and stuck them in their code. And here's where that friendly name shows up. And we could add an image, and it explains what permissions this Facebook application has. Right? If we want more permissions, we can set that. Like if we want to be able to get people's friends list and things like that, we can set that in the developer portal, what permissions our application should have. Okay, so this is the minimum amount of permissions that it can see the profile for anybody who logs in. So I'll click continue. Okay. So this mostly worked. It did authenticate us, and it called our callback URL, right? And it returned some kind of authentication code validating our login. We do have one small problem though, and that is somehow Passport didn't store who we are, because now it's crashing in our header when we're trying to show the user data. Modify our header a little bit or find a workaround. I'm just going to go and look in my MLab database for a minute. Let's see what happens when we call Passport use. It calls account find or create. So I didn't have an account with that profile in my MLab. So hopefully it created one, but we'll check. And then, yes, Joel, I'll get to your question in just a second. So let's look in MLab and see if it actually created an account with the information from my Facebook profile. So we'll go into my database and accounts. So I do actually have one. So there's my Facebook display name that was stored. Username. Notice it has no salt or hash value because we're not creating a password in our application. We're using Facebook. Actually, Facebook doesn't send us the password to store it locally. In a way, yeah, safer because we're letting Facebook do that. Joel, you had a question. Okay, so check for an error message first. And make sure that both the I and the D are capitalized. So we will need to sort this part out. It did work. It authenticated me and it created my user account. The problem here is when we redirected, loads, that user object was empty. So it didn't it's not recognizing the user. Passport's not storing that user account. I'm just going to check with this repository and see if there was anything we might have missed. So we initialized our session first. And then we serialized and deserialized after. I'm just going to try this. This is a slightly different callback. So here I called find one first and then said if find one doesn't return anything, then do the create. So a little more code than in his example. I'm just going to try it and see if that makes any difference. Just going to restart my app for a minute because I want to try one other thing. So it did create my account in MLab. I also want to check if I log in again, try and log in again with Facebook, what happens. We may have to make a few adjustments to this. We're on the right track, but we're maybe not quite there yet. It's the same error. I'm going to try this version for a minute. And see if that solves some of our problems. Don't change yours yet. Let's see what happens. So when I tried to do it again, our check didn't work because it's crashed with a duplication error. So I could log in once, but not again, which obviously is a bit of a problem. Try the same thing. See if you get the same. So open up a new private window. Try logging into your application again with Facebook. Curious if you get the same error I'm getting here. If I go back to MLab, curious if it created something else for me. So I still have the 4 accounts. So our code, same error. So our find or create doesn't seem to be working. Maybe this is why. Because notice when our account is trying to find, it's using the Facebook ID. We didn't store the Facebook ID. So how could we fit? What do we need to do to fix this? Yeah, we either want to change this to the Facebook user ID or add the Facebook ID to our account, delete our account, and then try again. Let's see if we have a user. So that's one option. Yeah, I'm going to try it this way. We're going to change this to search based on username. Good suggestions, Justin. Or we could just add Facebook ID to our model. That would be the other option. Let's try this and see if that. So I'm restarting now. Yeah, in app.js, we changed Facebook ID and profile.id to username is equal to profile.username. So I'll open up another private window and try again. Okay, so that fixed the one problem. It didn't try to recreate me again. So making this change in blue, that solves the problem of it trying to recreate the same user twice.
I think we did not make a callback page.
Well, the callback, we don't create an actual page. It simply calls authenticate and then does a redirection, much like our because this is how Passport works, right? We didn't create a page for Passport either. The issue that we're having, though, is this Passport Authenticate Facebook is not, it's not storing the user credential in our request.user, because now it's crashing in our header, right? We're trying to load the books view. But it's sort of crashing here in our header. So it's telling us it doesn't know what user is. So we'll have to figure out exactly why.
Actually, I didn't put the error, so I found the error. Account find or create is not a function.
Account find or create is not a function.
Yeah.
Hmm.
User account validate.
Okay. Let's see. All right. Let me just try this again for a minute. So yeah, he used find or create. So I'm wondering if maybe he's used a more recent version of Mongoose somehow, because ours doesn't seem to have find or create. Let me just try this for a moment. So we'll do find one. We could call find one. I'm going to again see if this works. We'll try it that way for a moment. We're almost there. We may have to take a break and sort it out after our break. It's getting a bit late. Well, we could try that. Just try it a slightly different way. I want to see if it makes any difference. No, in that case, it's trying to. So if we call find one, we should just be able to pass in the username, and if it exists, yet it still tried to create a new account. Last try at it, and then we'll take a break. Okay. So that seems to work. It shows my Facebook profile now. And now the real test is if I can log back in. So we need a slightly more, using that using the method he used in his documentation didn't work for us. So I'll explain what we did. I'll leave the code up, but we can go over it after the break. So here's my callback. I get an access token to refresh the profile. We're going to find one and pass in the profile display name to see if that user already exists in MLab. if the user exists, our user's not null, we just call back. We just keep going now and pass the user back. Otherwise, we create a new account with our display name and call save. So his code is more efficient, but I'm gonna have to find where that find or create method comes from because we don't have access to call it. So we're calling find first. Yeah, so he's done. So he's got find or create, which is a method we don't have access to in our code.
Yeah.
So I made some changes, but there's quite a few of them starting here.
Yeah.
I don't think I can put it on fewer lines. At the comments for now.
There is a function find one and update, find one and remove.
But we don't, yeah,
Yeah.
but we don't want to find, we don't care to update. We don't need to make changes. We just need to know if we have this account already in the database, yes or no. If we do, we look it up and we return the existing user account. Otherwise, we're going to create a new user account and save it.
When I try to run it, I get an error that says ESC is not a function. That happened a lot when I have it.
Okay. You know what? I'll push this code to GitHub. We'll take a break. I'll put this up on GitHub so you've got a chance to have a look at it. And why don't we take a break now? We'll come back at 12:45.
There's npm install mongoose -finder create.
And then it works.
And then usage is variable finder create require mongoose -finder create. Schema, and then you add a plugin called finder create to the schema.
So you need to do a fair bit of work to configure it. Okay. Just one thing at a time. I'm going to put this up on GitHub first of all.
Yeah. No rush. I already have lunch. So I'll just have it ready.
Mhm.
We're thinking of making cool nails in the news page.
Yep.
Or it's like the user can see that what message customers have or that kind of thing. Showing the
Okay.
and then I can change.
But there has to be edit and delete functionality as well.
Yeah. So is it okay for?
Yep.
Yeah. That's fine. Thank you.
That's why that like error comes in an escape error also. It's because in the error to use when it's the error, you just have that no title.
I thought I added the title last week.
And you don't have the user because you are using the user also.
Good point. Thank you. I'll mention that to the class. Thanks.
Yes, like at many places you just pass the error title but not the user, but we are using user in header.
Thank you.
So it's a plugin to Mongoose, which adds find and create method to the models. It's used for Passport, which requires it. But you'd think if you require Passport, the Passport should install it, right?
I'll have to read a bit more about it. Thanks.
Also for my assignment, I'm not sure if they're okay with Mongo database. They might want SQL. Not really sure. So should I just build my assignment with Mongo and then?
You can build it with SQL if you want to. If you have to, you can.
What would be the, like, what can I come to them and be like, it would be an advantage to use Mongo or SQL for speed?
It's the big advantage is speed, yeah.
Okay, now could I, if they're fine with the Mongo database just for the certificates, like that whole safety, whatever
Yeah.
program, but they want SQL for the other one, can I incorporate an ASP.NET and a Node.js? Two different websites, host them on the same server, and just kind of have the links going between them.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't have an issue.
No.
Have an SQL database, have a Mongo database, have them work together. Because the SQL database, I think, will primarily be for the equipment and for that sort of stuff later down the road.
The two apps, I don't think can run on the same domain though, because one's Node and one's ASP.
Well, you can run Node or you can run ASP on Azure. I just have to host two different web apps.
Right, they're
And
separate apps.
In the one, I just have a link that links to the other one.
Mm-hmm. But they'll be separate domains or subdomains at least.
So, because yeah, it doesn't, I can tell my one website to link to my other website.
Yeah.
They just don't need to know that it's two different websites. And
Mm-hmm.
I can do the masking from that, or the URL, and I'll have no idea. Right? So that's the idea there, is because there's some features I want from ASP and there's some I want from Node.
Right.
Now, for a cron job, I noticed NPM had a cron job package I could add, but would a Windows service be better for something like that? Basically wants to fire off emails based on a time calculation. So if,
You could use either.
yeah, have you worked with cron jobs in NPM? Like it was just an NPM cron jobs when I Googled it.
I haven't used it, but I don't see why it wouldn't work.
Okay. Have you used cron jobs in PHP or something? Because yeah, it said basically I'm screwed for C#. If I want to do that, I have to use a Windows service and integrate it. But I have no idea what a Windows service even is. But I'm assuming basically it just needs to tell the server to come on at midnight every night and do this calculation, right?
I would think you could run that kind of thing on Azure, but I've never done it, so I don't know how.
When I was Googling around for it, I couldn't find anything. They had like a crappy little workaround for it to work in C#, which it didn't look pretty.
Your streams, you got streams typed by a random guy named Black